We're super happy that you're here, and thanks so much for joining us today. All right. So we, as I said, are happy to have you here at today's webinar. The subject is about core pillars of messaging and how to create brand clarity that lasts. We're going to take you through some helpful tips and real-world success stories and some of the strategies that we've built over time. In addition to the presenters, which is Amy and I, we're going to be joined by Jennifer and Tracy, who are going to moderate. So drop your questions in the chat, hold your questions to the end, but we will have some time at the end to go through everything. So I'm Eve. I'm one of the founders here at Ashworth Creative. We are a marketing agency based out the Hudson Valley, New York, and we are expanding into the Salt Lake region as well. So we have two offices, and we started the company with a simple goal to combine smart strategy and bold creative to help businesses grow. And that's still at the heart of everything that we do. So Amy.
And I am Amy Kendall. I am the founder and CEO of Hello Story. We are a marketing, messaging, and copywriting agency. And from our very beginning, our focus has been on helping businesses figure out how to talk about what they do. And then we help them write the copy that communicates that. We want to do that in ways that help them pull their audiences in so that they can turn them into customers. And I absolutely love, because what I do is niche. I tell clients I'm the word girl. So I love teaming up with powerhouses like Ashworth Creative, because we get to develop the messaging, and then I get a front seat to seeing how they just run with it and deploy it across all the areas of a company's marketing.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're 22 years strong, agency built on the belief that strong creative drives strong results, whether it's working on branding and design, website strategy and development, integrated ad campaigns, digital and content management, such as SEO and paid lead generation campaigns. We also do video production and storytelling, communications, marketing strategy, and strategic planning. We craft impactful work that maximizes budgets, builds trust and credibility, and drives real engagement, leads, and sales. We're professional, collaborative, and ego-free, which is super important, focused on what works and how to make it work even better.
And I will just offer a quick little vouch for the team. I've gotten to work with them for several months now on a couple different projects, and they really are all those things that you've just said. They are a joy to work with as a partner, and I know that they absolutely go to bat for and fight for their clients to make sure they're getting the best results. So if you're looking for a creative partner, Ashworth, you can't go wrong.
Thanks, Amy. So kind. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to focus on clarifying your core pillars and messaging as a brand so that everything that your brand communicates is consistent, aligned, that it's intentional and outcome driven. We're going to look at real world patterns and case studies to understand what differentiates you and differentiates some of the brands that we've worked with in the past versus what's simply a feature of your brand. From there, we'll outline how to start without overthinking the process, discuss the value of an outside perspective in sharpening clarity, and close with a simple, actionable plan that we're going to throw a bone to you and see whether you want to take us up on the offer. So stay till the end because we have a really great offer for you. Okay. So the myth of hitting the ground running. We sort of love this phrase, hit the ground running, but in branding, it can be super duper risky. It can be a risk. Moving fast without direction often means moving confidently in the wrong direction. So this can happen if you build a lot of things quickly that don't actually support the goals that you're trying to reach.
And I think especially in the new year, right? Like we're only halfway through February, and I think we see a lot of this as everybody comes in and they're like, I'm gonna make 2026 the best year ever. I've got all these things I'm doing. I know for me, I see it especially on the content side of things. Like everybody's like, oh, I got my new website, or I'm creating all these new videos, plus I've got all my social media content, and I'm doing this advertising campaign, and they're just running in a million directions before they've taken the time to actually align on what they stand for and what they actually want to accomplish. And if we don't take the time to really get ourselves set first, then we're going to miss ultimately what we really want. We're going to miss the target, or we're going to end up like off somewhere where we didn't want to be, or we're just not even speaking to our audience anymore, and that's going to not get us the good results. It might feel productive because we're getting a lot done. I think all of us have that drive to like, I caught myself saying it last night, like if I'm not being productive, then I'm not like worthwhile or whatever, right? Like we all want to just be busy and create things, but it creates long-term friction when we do that, and it also doesn't give us the payoff that we want. It's like swimming upstream because we're just being busy. We're not actually getting stuff done.
Yeah, and I find that when you're building a brand from scratch, sometimes you don't even know quite who you are. You don't know what your core pillars are, because you're just starting, but you know what you stand for, right? You know why you were building that brand. And then you've got the flip side of that, which is you've got a brand that's really huge. They've grown beyond their original shape. How do they navigate like core pillars and messaging into that new shape that they've now evolved into? So we're going to talk about some of those challenges in upcoming slides.
And I think it really goes to show that like, well, I think often we're using language that maybe isn't understood by what we mean, right? So when we talk about core pillars, I think it's really important that we make sure that we all know what we mean by that, and kind of what that means, what it is when you have it in your business. And I found that for me, a lot of times when I'm talking to clients, they're like, what is that? What? So Eve, for you, when you guys work with core pillars, what does that look like with your Ashworth clients?
So for us, core pillars solve some problems, right? And so we're gonna dig into that. Like, what are core pillars? Core pillars are not taglines. They're not headlines, and they're not campaign themes. But here's what they are: they're non-negotiables of your identity. So, what is it within your brand that never changes? Um, so that's what we see are core pillars. They are non-negotiables. They really are the foundation of who you are. And then once you've got that foundation, you can work on the rest.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that those are, like it says on the slide, it's those things that stay consistent from year to year. It's those
Mm-hmm.
3 to 5 truths that just define who you are. And it really gives your marketing team the clarity that they need so that then as they're creating all of the content or all of the advertising campaigns or, creating things for the different marketing channels, they know what that North Star, so to speak, is that they need to align to. They give your leadership team alignment as to what they're working on, and it helps create a consistent experience for your customers because you're saying the same things over and over again. And really, marketing is an exercise in memorization. And so if we're not consistent, if we're always saying different things, if we're always doing different things, we're not helping people remember who we are and where we should sit kind of in their consciousness so that when they have a problem, they know to turn to us, right? So I think that pillars are important because it helps us create that consistent experience both for our team as well as for our customers.
Yeah, and oftentimes as organizations, when we're constantly looking at, a North Star example. So it could be that there's a couple of different um, companies that align with who you are that you look to and you think, oh, they're one day we're going to be like a North Star like them. And so that can muddy up your pillars too, because then you start to sound like somebody else and not yourself. So when pillars are clear, you know, your team can make decisions way easier than if they're not clear, or if you're depending on somebody else's core pillars and take them as your own. You stop debating tone in every meeting, because when you look at a North Star and you're like, oh, that's who I want to be, you start debating who you actually are because you want to be them, but you're actually you. And so defining who your core pillars are going to be very different to anybody else. And that's what makes you different. That's what makes you you. So, whenever there's a core pillar challenge, you find yourself every few months, maybe it's 18 months to 24 months, you're looking at, who are we? Like, let's rewrite our about us page. But if you establish who you are from the very beginning and pull that foundational core pillar messaging strengths together, then you're a lot stronger moving forward than anybody who's not going to take the time to stop, pause, and do that work together as a team.
And I think one of the things you said is really important, right? I think instead of kind of like chasing that trend of like, who are we? What does the market say we should be? You can actually get true to who you actually are as a company. So instead of, does this sound impressive? Do we need to rewrite the about page so that we've got this, impressive new thing on it? It's, does this actually align to who we are? It's that authenticity. And I think, especially in this world of like AI and fake news and all of that, like that authenticity and that truth is going to become more and more and more important as we continue moving forward, as customers look for people who are authentic and genuine and true to their values and really showcase that. So without pillars, it can be really easy to like every discussion becomes this like, oh, this is a strategic decision. We have to decide what this is because this is going to determine our future. But once we've determined what those pillars are, really it's just about aligning with who we are, how we're authentically showing up, and it gives us that clarity to be able to do that with confidence instead of trying to like scramble and find our feet every time we're faced with a choice.
Exactly. Okay. So what is messaging? Like messaging is built on, it's layered on top of your core pillars. So once you've established your core pillars, we can circle back around, and this is oftentimes part of the same process. We develop your core pillars based upon interviews with you and your team, or even outside clientele, patients, whoever it is, what type of organization you represent. So messaging is a little bit different. So pillars are internal; they're internal facing towards your team, and they're the truths your leadership team agrees on together to help lead you forward. And they define how you operate, what you value, and what your target markets consistently expect.
And I think it's really important to make sure we clarify this because I know for me, when I work with clients, a lot of times they're confused. Okay, wait, we're doing core pillars, we're doing messaging, where's the line here? And I think what Eve said is important. Pillars, there are the internal part. This is who we are, this is how we define this for each other. And then messaging is how we show that to the world. So it's kind of that translation layer of like, this is who we are and this is how we talk about it, right? So it takes that strategy and turns it into a language that clients and customers can actually understand. This is what we're actually going to say to people, whereas the core pillars is who we are. And sometimes we don't define that who we are in language that communicates everything we mean to the customer. And sometimes we need a lot more language to communicate that to ourselves than we're going to actually share with them. So messaging is that translation. It's how do we show up in the world with our core pillars.
Exactly.
And then taking it one step further, messaging versus content. This is one that I get asked about a ton. And if you followed me on LinkedIn at all, you'll see that I actually post videos about this fairly often. Messaging versus content. This is I think a lot of times these terms get used interchangeably, but it's really about that foundational strategy versus your day-to-day communication. One way that I like to describe it is if you think of like your pantry, the ingredients in your pantry is like your flour, your sugar, your baking powder, your oil, all that stuff. That's like your messaging. These are the ingredients we're using. And then the content is what you make with those. So contents are your social media posts, your blog posts, your videos, your website. That's the actual stuff you're putting out there, right? This is the cookies, the cakes, the bread, the yummy things that I'm making with the ingredients in my pantry. But you can't say that my social media post is messaging or a core pillar. Like it might be expressing my core pillar through my messaging and it shows up in my content, but it's the foundational strategy versus the day-to-day communication. Eve, how have you seen this show up with your clients and kind of how they understand this?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it get pretty muddled a lot of the time, where people don't understand, they understand features and they understand what their features are. Sometimes they don't translate those into benefits. And then how does that play into like messaging content? Like, I feel as though there is a lot of shakiness that happens where people don't understand and clarify what they currently do. And so their messaging is just, it incorporates a broader audience than it needs to. And then a lot is lost,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? There's a lot
Yeah.
that is lost. So unless you really understand what messages versus content is, it messaging versus content. And if you don't get that core pillars sorted and messaging like strapped down, then your content is oftentimes missing the mark.
It's just all over the place. It's that kind of like throwing
Right.
spaghetti at the wall type of marketing.
Yeah,
So we've
it's like
got,
it's what we call spray and pray.
yes, exactly. Exactly. So instead, what we want to do is we want to have our core pillars that defines who we are. These are internal, they're foundational, they don't change every quarter. And then we take that and we lead it into our messaging, which translates those beliefs into real language that we can use for real people and our customers to understand. That's kind of the structure that we hang everything on. And then content is like that final expression of that messaging. It's the website page, the social post, the sales deck, the campaign. It's what people see. And obviously we need all three of those things, but by laying the foundation with those core pillars and then translating that into messaging before we get to the content, we're going to have just a level of clarity that's going to allow people to connect with things a lot better.
And so we've really chosen the title of this webinar intentionally. And it creates a real opportunity at this point. The fact that you're here, you're like joining in, you're part of what we see as our like conversation today. Because clarity isn't a constraint. It's not a constraint on cleverness, or it's not a constraint on creativity, but it is a strategic advantage. So it does create a ton of opportunities for you to be able to understand what it is that you do, why you do it, get the team all aligned, speaking in the same way. And, if you don't do that and you come up with like cleverness type of campaigns, or campaigns that try and grab people's attention, we all want that click to be able to report back to our board and our team, our leaders, that we got this many clicks, we got this many looks at our website. But if you're not landing a clear message, then clever campaigns, sometimes they win attention, but they don't win loyalty. And so what we're looking for in terms of clear brands, we want to win loyalty over time. We want to build trust with your target audiences and build loyalty.
And I think what you said is important too, that you said sometimes clever campaigns can win clicks. And I would say that sometimes is a key in that sentence, because I think clarity is always going to trump cleverness. Like cleverness oftentimes, especially as like marketers and advertisers, we get really wrapped up in this idea of like, oh, it's got to be cute and clever, or it's going to win me this award or whatever, and we kind of take it overboard. Or even internally companies can do this. You take that overboard, and you lose the clarity. And if we lose clarity, we're asking people to think too hard about what we're putting out there, and they're just not going to do that. It just is increasing the cognitive load that we're putting on them. They're going to move on. And it even affects our teams, right? Like if our teams have to think too much about what we're trying to create, it's going to bog down that decision-making process. It's going to make it harder for them to create good campaigns that are going to be effective, to have good sales conversations, all of that. So when we can lead with clarity, get that defined, have that, those decisions are made. We already know what this message is. It makes it a lot easier for us to do things quicker, to make sure that sales conversations go smoother and convert at a better rate. Our marketing is going to stay consistent, and our audience doesn't have to work to understand what we do. Like anytime that we can decrease the work our audience has to do to understand us, that's going to be in a win for us, because in reality, people don't buy things that they don't understand. So if your value isn't immediately clear, they're going to hesitate. So we want to use that clarity to build our confidence in our campaigns. Confidence is going to build trust, and then that is all ultimately going to lead to better conversion and better results for the client internally, or us as we're helping them succeed.
And I think before we move on to the next slide, I've seen this also in reverse, where you have a big regional brand that everybody loves, and then they rebrand, or maybe they merge with another brand, and they come up with a brand that is really maybe disconnected from their loyal regional target market and audiences. So I've seen this happen where it just rebrands and it misses the mark, and then they're not talking in a way that connects with their loyal audience. And
Mhm.
so oftentimes that can also create a lot of confusion, and the clarity is lost. That's that connection that you had. And so communication is super key in these moments. It's not that you have to rebrand or anything. It's just that opening up those human conversations, those humanized type of wording, and building clarity that you can then connect with your audience again. So I've
Yeah.
seen that happen too,
Yeah.
which can be, scary. It does take shape, and so even though you evolve into a different shaped company, it's still it can lose momentum. You can lose momentum there, and you can gain it back. But I've seen organizations gain it back, and I've seen them not gain it back. So this is a key slide in terms of making sure that cleverness, or even you can translate cleverness to like blandness or clean. People will come out with a new
Mhm.
brand that's completely clean and sterile, and it disconnects from the audience that really loved them in the first place. So
Mhm.
that can
And I think
happen
on a
too.
smaller scale, you can even see that, like, even brands that maybe the brand overall is doing well, but the like billboards are my favorite example of this, right? Like, how many times do you drive up and down the highway and see a billboard where you're like, what on earth? Who is that? What are they trying to say? Like, and that's frankly just a waste of your advertising spend now because you're not actually telling anyone anything because you were trying to be cute and clever with your message instead of just being clear and telling them who you are, how you can help them, and how they can get in touch with you.
Exactly. All right. So I'm going to dig into a little bit of a case study here. We're going to talk about LCS. You can see on the screen that we've done a lot with this company. Um, we've we originally began at a point of major inflection of the company. They had a family founded business located in Poughkeepsie, New York, but they had expanded regionally and across states as well. So they were a family owned business, but had done really well in building a business. And they had a strong reputation. Everybody loved them, still does. They had lots of loyal local clients. Their offices had expanded into Texas and Florida, and they had high hopes of expanding over into California as well. And the founder at this time was retiring. And so new management wasn't just inheriting a company, they were inheriting a real legacy, a real part of the fabric of Poughkeepsie. And so they had a vision to grow LCS into even more areas. So they wanted to become a nationwide facilities partner. And how, I guess they came to us and they asked us the question, like, how do you scale without losing the trust you've built locally or regionally? So the website at that time leaned heavily into family values, the founder stories, awards, seal of excellence, the strong emphasis on being a family run business. Their collateral, on the other hand, focused clearly on services and industries, healthcare, education, hospitality. They had it all siloed, including commercial and industrial cleaning. And their testimonials tucked neatly into the back of all their collateral, and it was on their website also. And the repeated messaging that they had placed across everything was, we're your premier outsourcing partner. Well, we came in and didn't find any clarity in that. And we could see where the brand was beginning to wobble and where it broke down. So because the homepage focused on this outsourcing language, the discovery of new like facility managers or even facilities managers that have been outsourcing for a long time, they saw the phrase as outsourcing partner, but they didn't wake up every day looking for an outsourcing partner. They woke up every day looking for reliability, attention to detail, before and after results, responsiveness, a partner who won't let their facility down. So you can see the difference there, right? They're trying to be clear in the messaging, but actually they were missing out all of the benefits that they bring to a client from their website. So the term yes, go
Sorry,
ahead.
just really quick with that. I would bet that their team like thought premier outsourcing partner said all the things. that their client was
Yeah,
looking for, right? Like, I
absolutely.
think when we're in that, we know what we know what we're trying to say, right? And so we
Mhm.
pick these phrases that often feel like they're being clear, feel like they're being all encompassing. And it's so critical to have that outside perspective of like you guys coming in to be like, actually, it
Yeah,
doesn't mean what you think it means, right?
because it was technically accurate. It was
Hmm.
what they were doing,
Yeah.
and but it was a little bit distracting to those that they were trying to reach. It
Hmm.
focused more on a transaction than it did
The partnership. Yeah.
transformation on partnership, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. So humanizing your language to make it connect to another human, because we're all individuals. We're all doing every single day what it is that we want to do. And we need people to help us. We need companies to help us. And so connecting on that level is essential. And even though, again, they were technically correct, it was just missing the mark.
Hmm.
So, we came in, we talked through the core pillars, which at the time was reliability at scale, detail driven execution, long term partnership, family values in action, but not as a headline. Family values in action could become like social proof on their website, right? Could be in the form of testimonials, could be in the form of reviews, so family became a supporting strength, but not the lead story in this case. Services were prioritized by revenue impact, not alphabetical order. Industries were presented strategically and elevated. And the language became a level above. So the services didn't actually change, the standards didn't change, but the clarity did. And the clarity gave new management the confidence to grow into this national firm, which they are today. They've grown into this national firm, which is a great case study. Um, we've helped them redo their logo, their website is new. We've helped them do that, and we were able to. But core pillars and messaging was the foundational service that we worked together and partnered with them on. I'm going back years. I would say it was probably 10 years ago that we worked on their core pillars and messaging. And then out of that, you can see has grown and transformed them into who they are today.
And I think it's important too that like so the core pillars, right? We talked a lot at the beginning of it being who you are. And you guys worked on that 10 years ago. I would bet that a lot of that same core is still true today, but you also said that they've evolved, they've transformed. So sometimes it does make sense to go back and adjust those core pillars a lot, or not a lot, to adjust those core pillars a little bit, but you're not doing that a lot, right? You're doing that every now and then as things shift and evolve, but it's really getting that clarity on who are we and being able to hold to that like core foundation and then build from there.
Yes, yeah. And you're not wobbling every single time you want to write a social media post
Mm-hmm.
because you've got these roots that are growing and heading and going one direction so that you can build into another direction because it's always there.
Yeah.
You've so yeah. All right. Moving on to Council of Industry. They are, just to add some context before Amy digs into this a little bit, the Council of Industry is not a new organization. They've been around for a very, very long time, but they have evolved into being who they are today. It's one of the most respected manufacturing organizations in the Hudson Valley that really represents, and we wanted to choose a couple of options here in these scenarios to show you growth, but also growth here on a non-for-profit scale, because they are an organization that really advocates for manufacturers in New York State. So they've got deep relationships, a long history, and real influence. And we've worked with them for many years. We've rebuilt the website. And by the way, we did not rebuild their websites with core pillars and messaging. They didn't have that at the time. We really focused in on the look and the feel. We have not redone their logo. Their logo remains the same, but we have supported their events with strategic materials. Most of their events, we've also done video for them throughout the years. So we wanted to show you a sample that approaches core pillars and messaging from an angle that we've already worked with the client. So earlier in the year, last year, they came to us and they said, we want video, and we think that video is a good place to start. And that's when we started to say, oh, let's look at the foundation here. And then it started to wobble and crack a little bit, and then we went back to them and said, actually, we think we need to take a couple of steps back and look at your core pillars of messaging, really figure out who you are so that you can go out there and tell the world who you are. And now we're filtrating that throughout. So I just wanted to lead into this, and then Amy, let's.
Yeah, no, I think that's super important because I often, when I say that I work on messaging, people assume that that means I only work with startups. And I actually rarely work with startups. Typically, we're working with people who are established. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Council of Industry is an excellent example of that, of this organization that had this rich history and amazing results. They do incredible things for their members in their region. And but there was still work to be done on this message clarity and building this foundation. So for them, their messaging had really grown pretty organically over time. And that very rarely, I think, equals clarity because we just kind of collect things as we go, right? And again, internally, it might make sense. We kind of build these traditions of, oh, well, this is what this means. And so we just, as we bring people in, we tell them what this is, and they just kind of get inoculated into the system, right? So it doesn't build clarity when we do that. And so often it's better for us to kind of go back to that drawing board, take a step back, and really reevaluate and take the time to clearly articulate the value that we're bringing so that leadership, members, partners, everybody just has a clear picture of who we are and what we're trying to do. And so with this project in particular, we really wanted to focus on why the membership matters. These guys are an organization that serves, like Eve said, these members who are manufacturers in this region of New York. And they have some long-term members who've been there for years and years and decades and generations, actually. But they also had some who would come in and not really be sure why they would want to stick around. And so we really wanted to focus on why does membership matter to you? Why the advocacy that Council of Industry is engaging in matters. And show why does being part of this organization offer a return. So we did a number of interviews. We talked to their leadership team. We talked to several of their members who had different experiences to try to narrow down what are people seeing, what are they experiencing. And there was a lot of stuff that they had going on. There's workforce development work that they do, advocacy, they're doing training and programming to help their members' leadership teams develop the skills they need. They're putting on events, they have publications, they're starting a podcast, like there's all kinds of stuff going on. And that actually makes messaging a little bit more difficult because now you not only are trying to find that clarity, but you're also trying to like find it among more weeds, right? So to speak. And nothing was really aligned. The website's saying one thing, their publication's saying something else, their emails are saying something else. There's really great depth in a lot of these materials, like their magazine or their emails. Their members actually talked a lot about the value that their emails bring, but it wasn't leveraged across all their different channels. There wasn't a single clear framework pulling it all together. So we had these interviews, we were able to uncover those things that were most important, those things that were being repeated time and again. And I found this is true, this was especially true in this situation, but I find it's fairly universally true. It's often that these organizations know who they are. It's in there. We just have to get it out and to listen for those patterns of what keeps coming up over and over and over again. And then to structure that, to build in the structure of the pillars. And once we did that, once we had those conversations, listened for those patterns, identified those things, we were able to present the pillars. And in this case, we had advocacy drives real change, workforce development that builds the future, local community and connection, and targeted resources for operational excellence. And once we presented those, they were like, yes, it's who we are. Like they had only like tiny little wording tweaks, pretty minor ones to make this because they were able to recognize themselves in that. But it took having those conversations and taking the time to listen for those patterns in order to be able to find that. So
And
Eve,
I
oh, sorry.
found though, Amy, that because we did a very comprehensive approach here, and we introduced out their members into the process, we
Mm-hmm.
found things and discovered things that we would never have discovered if we hadn't have done those interviews.
Yes.
So sometimes people think that core pillars of messaging is just for the lead for the team, the internal team, for us to come in and really do some digging into interviewing and getting the right core pillars of messaging out of the core team. But in actual fact, when you introduce us to your outside audience, they can offer so much to the conversation. And because of our longevity with this client, we knew them very well. We were able to nail it first time. And
Yeah.
it's really an effort that can be inclusive. So it creates ownership in the process from outside individuals, and they are invested in the process too, which has really been a nice thing. But it also gives us clarity on who and how they're represented outside, perception wise. And that brought so much to this, I think, process.
I agree. And I think a really good point that you bring up too is by doing those outside, like I talked about how they had so many different channels and so much that they were doing. And so when we talked to them, they said all those things, right? But then by having those outside perspectives, that allowed us to be able to choose what are those things that are most important, right? It helped them to
Yes.
kind of rise to the top, having those outside voices to hear what was important to their customers, to that audience, so that we could really prioritize what were the most important things in all that they were doing. Because the other thing too, and we'll get into this a little bit later, you don't want to have 10 core pillars. We're looking for 3 to 5. So it really is often it's about narrowing it down, and having those outside voices helps you do that in a way that is, intelligent and smart and focused and is going to resonate with the audience.
Yeah. I think the other point that I wanted to make here was that the client is very humble. They know that they do great work, but they don't like talking about themselves a whole lot. And so this really allowed, also having the outside perspective allowed them to feel like, oh my gosh, I knew we did great work, but it really is great. And it solidified their position within their own minds, which I think is a lot of this too, is like, how do you feel about yourself? And is that reflected in your company's core pillars of messaging?
Hmm.
Especially if you're small or you're a small organization where you only have like 6 employees or so. And so that also can be a great exercise to get some outside perspective. But really, really enjoyed working with Council of Industry on this.
And I think the other really important thing for them is it helped them to not only be more confident in being able to talk about what they do, but it helped align their content. They had so
Mhm.
many things they were doing. This gave them a strategic focus so that because they already had a lot of the content efforts, they just didn't have a system or a framework or structure to put it on, right? So this gave them that so that their efforts could be much more effective because
Mhm.
they were all aligned and they're saying the same things. They're building that consistency. They're helping people remember why they matter and why they should be engaged.
Yep. All right. Great.
Okay, so with all of that, we've looked at how great this works. So we wanted to give you guys some useful knowledge that hopefully you can take away and start using right away. We wanted to talk about how you could actually get started with doing this. So first things first, and we're going to go into each of these a little bit more in depth, but you're going to want to start by clarifying your audience and your goals. Kind of marketing 101, right? And then you're going to identify your true differentiators as a company. You're going to want to make sure you've got 3 to 5, like we just said. And then once you have that core developed, then you can build messaging to support each of those pillars. And you're going to want to apply it consistently. Like we just said with Council of Industry, that's what has helped them get traction, right? Is by applying this messaging consistently. That's where they're seeing the results. So let's break those first 3 down a little bit further. So for clarifying your audience and goals, we want to start by getting curious. We want to start by asking a lot of questions. This is actually one of my favorite parts of the process is working with clients to help them talk through this. Like, who are you trying to reach? What do they care about? What problems are they facing? We don't start with trying to just like write the copy, right? We start with trying to understand who we're talking to so that we can be more effective in doing that. So we want to know who's your audience, what do they do, what level of understanding are they at. This one's really important. Like we're working on a project right now for a company that they speak to engineers and architects, and we have to speak to them very differently than if we were, say, talking to someone who's trying to get their house packed up and moved across the country, right? Like those are different audiences, and we need to make sure we understand who they are. So make sure you understand who you're talking to, what pressure are they facing, what do they want as it relates to your service. Like I said, are they the technical engineer who's looking for this super high level of quality, or are they someone who wants to know that, the caramel sauce you made is going to be the most delicious thing they've ever put on their ice cream. Like, make sure you understand what they're looking for. And with that, like, is it reputation? Are they looking for efficiency, growth? All those different factors. You want to understand what is keeping them from getting that. What problem are they facing? How do they feel about that? And then are they frustrated, overwhelmed, cautious, skeptical, uncertain, worried? Like, what are the emotions behind that? I think, especially as we move into this new era with AI, that emotional side of it is going to become even more and more important. Like, if you want to connect with humans on a human level, we have to know and understand the emotions that are there. And then ultimately, we want to know what we as an organization are trying to achieve. Do we want more leads? Are we trying to build our reputation? Are we going for clearer positioning? Do we want to grow? Right? Like what our goals are also determine how we want to approach our audience. Um, and like I said, really this is like marketing 101. Know your audience. It's like the basic rule of marketing, right? So, even in your 22 years of working in marketing, I am sure you have seen some major missteps in terms of not knowing who you're talking to. So, what can happen if we don't take the time to know who we're talking to and make sure we're aligned with that?
It's sort of what we talked about before, which is like a spray and pray type of approach
Mhm.
where we're talking to everybody and not specifically to who it is that needs to hear you. So oftentimes the horror stories around this is that you attract the wrong type of client, which is a
Yes.
lot of resource waste. There's like scope creep where you're telling people that you do stuff that you actually don't do because you didn't get your you didn't clarify your goals,
Or they're just
and
expecting you to do the thing, right?
that's right, yeah. And then you just lose confidence, and as a team confidence is lost within the leadership and vice versa. And so there's a lot of messiness that can happen in these types of situations if you don't clearly signal to your audience what it is that you do, who you are, and how you can help them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can get messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does sound so very basic, but it's so true. Like I literally had a call yesterday with a client where we were looking at a website and I was like, so this doesn't actually tell me what you do. And maybe we should add that to the top of the website. So it really is important to make sure they know what you do and know who you're talking to. So,
And there's a lot of engineers that actually don't, they have businesses that are, because they're an engineer, they often
mhm,
write content that's above the normal
yes.
um, processing capacity of a normal individual. And I don't say normal lightly, I'm just saying the average Joe. Like oftentimes it could be that you write you think your message is clear and you're writing something on your website, well then you misalign the entire SEO
Yes.
because you're now writing to above what an average person understands. And so we see that a lot too, especially
Yeah.
in manufacturing or SaaS products. We see that a
Mhm,
lot because they have written content that is above what the average Joe really needs to know.
mhm.
And it disconnects, and people don't actually understand what it is that you do and how you offer the services to those that you are wanting to offer services to. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's absolutely critical. Make sure you clarify your audience and understand what your goals are too. And then once you've done that, then you can move into identifying your true differentiators. This is really about understanding why customers should buy from you versus buying from someone else. It really comes down to your answer to why do you care about solving this problem. And then you also want to show that you have empathy for kind of where they're at, what they're going through. Like, we get it. This is a crappy problem, and that's why we're here to solve it for you, right? And then you want to show that you have authority and competence in solving that problem. And a lot of these things, then, certifications, awards, recognitions, even just like number of repeat clients or how long people have done business with you, lots of these things can feed into this. But you want to make sure that you are understanding what sets you apart in this market. And maybe that's the level of care that you provide or the level of service that you give, or maybe it's that you've been doing it longer or have a unique process, right? Like, there's many different things that could be these differentiators, but you want to define those so that then as you're doing your messaging and ultimately creating your content, you're again being consistent and it's not a new flavor of the week every kind of day kind of a thing. So Eve, I think it's really easy, especially in this section of true differentiators, for people to focus on features versus something that's actually a differentiator. So what have you found as you've worked with clients that's helped to tell the difference or help them to really hone in on those benefits and not just like a feature?
Okay, so a feature is something that you as a company possess. It's something that you have and is it's something that you currently adhere to and that is owned by you. But a differentiator is something that's a little bit more external. It is what has changed the outcome for your clients or patients. So they are a little bit different and they mean different things. So it could be that we hear a lot of the time, especially in healthcare, we have a state-of-the-art facility. What does that mean to the patient? Or what does that mean to a client? So we're currently working with the manufacturer that makes bags for the 6 million Frito chips that we eat as a nation each year. And so he has a state-of-the-art facility, right? But that translates into something like, we reduce project approval timeline by 20% because we have aligned processes that are efficient for all of our stakeholders so that you can make a formal decision or submission really fast. So you can see how it's like, we have a state-of-the-art facility. A lot of people are like, we have this amazing facility. It's a great thing. But what does that mean to me?
To the client.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's critical. So, and it ties back so well with that knowing your audience. Like, know your audience first, then figure out your differentiators because you need to be able to tie them back to what that's going to do for that audience. And then finally, you're going to take all of that and you're going to define your 3 to 5 core pillars. And we want to make sure that we've got fewer pillars because it gives us a stronger focus. 3 strong pillars are going to be 5 weak ones every day of the week. And please don't have more than 5, like, unless you have different divisions and maybe you've got pillars for different divisions, but like, you still need your overarching ones. So your pillars need to reflect your strengths. They need to be broad enough to support multiple services. So like I just said, if you're going to have multiple divisions, sure, you can have messaging specific for those divisions, but ultimately you also need to have your umbrella as well. Like, what is it for your company as a whole? And then it needs to be simple enough that your entire team can understand what these pillars mean. You shouldn't have to have like an hour-long training on your pillars for people to understand them. They need to understand what these are from being able to read them. Because if your team can't explain the pillars, if they can't remember them, they're not going to use them, they're not going to lean on them, and so it's not actually going to be who your organization is. So they need to feel true, they need to feel usable. Really, you should be able to feel like you can create your content for the next year around these pillars. And if your answer is no to any of those, like if you don't feel like it's true, usable, or lasting for a year, then you need to keep refining and keep working on it. These aren't headlines, they're foundations. So I know I've already hit on this a little bit, Eve, but what are your thoughts on why it's so important to narrow it down to that 3 to 5? And what have you seen happen when clients, clients sometimes get pushy and they like to try to push for more things. So what have you seen happen if they don't get focused?
It really ties back to what you talked about earlier, which is memorability, but also cohesion. So
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have a memorable amount of core pillars that people just automatically know and feel like they're part of the brand itself, then they lose cohesion, because when they're out there talking about you, you can't control how people talk about you out there in the field when they're out doing what they do every single day. But I think if you make it so it's very simple for them to memorize, and that you can every single every single piece of content afterward is aligned and has cohesion, that's where why we build core pillars, right? So
Yeah.
I think I don't want to take up any more time, but I think that's definitely, we've touched on it, but it's to do with memorability, and then making sure that all of your content is cohesive, that
Yeah,
it draws from those core pillars.
for sure. So all of this is really, it can be really hard to do for yourself. Um, I have I have conversations with clients, multiple times a week where they're like, "Oh, well, I tried to start on it and I just don't feel like I can do it or whatever," right? And I'm here to tell you that is hard for everybody. It's hard for me when I try to work on my own stuff. Like having an outside perspective makes a huge difference when you are doing this work. So, 'cause it just brings that objectivity, the proven frameworks, the neutral facilitation. Eve, what have you seen on this front?
Yeah, I see that each one of us are working, if you can visualize this, from inside of a glass jar. And sometimes the back side of that label that you see is very different to the front side of the label, and it always
Mhm.
is, right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, if you're working from inside of a glass jar, you don't see outside perspective. And so when you hire somebody who is going to look from the outside in, they see things that you might miss. And so um, that's how I like to visualize working with an outside firm.
Mhm.
And believe me, I've got into deep water myself. I'm like, oh, we as a team can totally do that, and we can't do it for ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
And that sounds funny as a marketing company, but we can't. We always have to introduce somebody else into the picture to see something about ourselves that we didn't perceive or see,
Yeah.
and that's invaluable to every organization.
And then
So,
as a partner in helping clients with this work, what kind of process do you guys take?
well, we do very much the same process that we've just talked about. Um, in terms of um, in terms of process, we will build. Um, I think that we as an organization come because we have worked for 20 years humanizing organizations, and I think we talked about a little bit about AI and how that can be introduced into the process. It's definitely made things run a little bit faster, but we still have all the knowledge and the expertise and the know-how to build um, core pillars of messaging. And I think that when goals are only as strong as the clarity behind them, it's very easy um, to 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 misalign those goals, right?
Mhm.
So to gain clarity, you're going to have to jump in, do interviews, align the core pillars. And then messaging turns into strategy, it turns into execution. Consistency builds trust over time, and everything just begins to align and grow because you trust the process, you trust your core pillars. Your clients are now trusting you, and on a different level. It's not just the level that was before, but now they're trusting you in a deeper way. So there's loyalty there. And I think that is what's really lovely about this process. It teaches you so much about yourself, and it allows you to invite an outside perspective in to be able to build something for you that's foundational. And I think that gives you confidence. I've seen it in my clients. It gives them so much confidence to just go forth and conquer, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Clarity builds
it's really
confidence.
nice. Yes.
100%. Yes, I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. And I think that hopefully, if anyone takes anything away from this, it's that you've got to get that clarity, that foundational clarity there, because that's really what you need in order to be able to move forward with confidence, be able to build trust with your audience and really be able to grow and move forward.
Well, do we have any questions? I know we've only got a few minutes left. We've really enjoyed talking to you today. Have you any questions that have come up in the chat? Anybody want to open up and ask a question?
The
Great.
first one would be, how do I know if my brand actually has clear pillars or if we're just repeating buzzwords?
Mm.
That's a question for the brand audit.
Yeah.
I think that is a great question. How do you know? I think you do know, because if you're as a team debating about what you should put in content or use within content, that is a clear, to me, that's a clear reason to look at your core pillars and messaging. Or if you're every single time you speak to somebody within the organization and they speak differently about you and they haven't really adhered to the core pillars and messaging, it may be a good time to refine them. So we definitely can refine core pillars and messaging too. But I think that you're going to see cracks in your team and how they talk about you, maybe some conversations happening in the boardroom that's around discussion rather than clarity. That's where you know, like, oh, should we revisit the core pillars of messaging? I mean, is that your opinion, Amy?
Yes, and the other thing that I wanted to point out there is, Tracy, in that question it says, how do I know it's not just buzzwords, right? And I
Yeah.
think that comes back to that outside, what are the customers saying? What is your audience saying? Like if it's something that is just, the new trendy thing in marketing, it's probably not something we want there. But if it's something that we're hearing over and over and over again from our audience, whether that's, in the places that they're in or actually in interviews, or, you can even do AI is great in that it allows us to do really good analysis of like testimonials and things like that. And so, you can run an analysis or an evaluation that's like that helps you uncover some of those patterns if you can't do interviews. So I would say really also lean into that. What can you learn from what your audience is saying? Is that something that's showing up in their language as well?
Great. Thank you. A couple other ones. If our messaging is inconsistent across platforms, where is the best place to start fixing it?
Core pillars and messaging. It's going back to the root.
Yeah.
It's like taking a step back, and it's the similar situation with the Council of Industry. They came to us, and there's another client that we're working with right now, and they came to us and they're like, we want content, we want video. And then when you start digging in and start to uncover what would this video do, and what are the goals of the video, and what do you want people to do to when they respond to the video, is what's the next step, and what are you trying to get, what is the voice and tone. And when you start digging into that and they don't have the answers, that's when it's like, oh, well, let's look and take a step back. And I think that's what you've got to do with your content. If you're sending out content that is not aligned, you're missing 30% of your audience and not hitting home. And
Yeah.
so oftentimes it takes many times hearing the same thing from you for
Mhm.
people to click and say, oh, wow, that's why I should align with them. That's why I should partner with them, because they get me. And so sometimes it takes the same content on all platforms, and that's okay to do. It doesn't have to be the exact same. It can be different versions of that content, but aligning that content is going to bring you a lot more interest
Mhm.
and trust than if you don't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's like we talked about at the beginning, right? That the content is like multiple steps down. Like we got to start with the foundation and then we can figure out the content. If we start with the content first, we're kind of all over the place. But then once you get the messaging figured out and you're like, okay, well, but now where should I start in implementing it, right? That is a different question. That's how do we take the strategy and apply it? And that's going to be different per situation, right? Like you're going to base that decision on, a number of factors, including your audience and your goals and all that kind of stuff. But by having the core pillars and messaging figured out, you have a foundation to build on and to move forward from.
Thank you. One last one. If an organization has already gone through an exercise like this, how often should they revisit or work on updating their core pillars and messaging?
I think as soon as you feel as though your company has grown into a new, it's being reshaped, it's a good time to look.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say there's an acquisition that happens that's pretty major, it's a good time to look. If there is a change in leadership, it's a good time to just become aligned on your core pillars and messaging again. Like whenever there's like a reshape, it's good to just take a look at. And that usually happens like every 5 years for a client, for companies that we've worked with. So, and we don't have to dig in all the way, but we can absolutely do a reboot, right?
Yep.
So,
for sure.
All right. This was awesome. I really love that you came, and I feel so honored that you're here listening to Amy and I. We're just here to help you in any way, point you in the right direction. So thanks so much. It was awesome. And thank you, Amy. That was so great.
Thank you. I was going to say, thanks for having me. This was so fun. It was great to be here and to be able to share this information with you guys. Our goal is always to provide a lot of value. So we'd love to see you.